19 years after the formation of the Galactic Empire and the events of Revenge of the Sith, the galaxy is in a state of civil war. The Rebel Alliance has won their first major victory by stealing plans to the Galactic Empire's secret weapon, the Death Star. Hoping that the stolen plans can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy, Princess Leia Organa, who is in custody of the plans, attempts to race home aboard the Tantive 4. However, her ship is intercepted by the Imperial I-class Star Destroyer Devastator over the desert planet of Tatooine. The ship is captured, and several Imperial stormtroopers come aboard. After defeating the small number of guards defending the ship, the Sith Lord Darth Vader arrives to assess the damage. Vader is outraged and questions Captain Antilles, whom he eventually strangles and kills. Hiding on the ship, Princess Leia is able to record a holographic message with the help of R2-D2, and gives the droid the plans for the Death Star and the responsibility of taking the message to Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi in hiding on Tatooine. Leia is spotted by stormtroopers and they shoot her with a stun blast and bring her before Vader. Leia claims she and the ship's crew were on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan, but is disbelieved by Vader, who denounces her as a traitor and has her taken prisoner. Vader orders a message be sent to the Imperial Senate, informing them that the ship was destroyed, with everyone on board killed. R2-D2 and C-3PO use an escape pod in order to escape the ship and reach the planet of Tatooine below.
After arguing and going their separate ways for a while, the droids are individually picked up by Jawa traders and brought aboard a sandcrawler. They are later bought by moisture farmer Owen Lars and his nephew, Luke Skywalker, a young farmer who lost his parents as a baby and hopes to one day be a starfighter pilot just like his friends. While cleaning R2, Luke discovers the hologram. At the mention of Obi-Wan, he wonders if she means his neighbor Ben Kenobi. While eating dinner with Owen and his Aunt Beru, Owen asks Luke to take R2 to Anchorhead the next day to have his memory wiped, and expresses his hope Luke will stay with them for one more harvest season before sending his application to the Academy. R2 escapes from the Lars homestead in search of Obi-Wan, whom the droid claims to be the property of Luke, and C-3PO search the desert and find R2 the next day, only to be attacked by Sand people. Luke and his droids are rescued by Ben Kenobi, who confirms he is Obi-Wan. At his home, Obi-Wan gives Luke his father's lightsaber. As Obi-Wan recalls his own friendship with Luke's father, he tells Luke that he and his father were a part of the Jedi Order that once protected the galaxy before the Empire took over, and that Darth Vader was once his apprentice before he fell to the dark side of the Force and murdered Luke's father. After viewing Princess Leia's message carried by R2-D2, Obi-Wan attempts to persuade Luke to accompany him to Alderaan. Luke refuses to go until the group discovers the remains of the sandcrawler, the Jawas having been killed by stormtroopers searching for the droids. Realizing this, Luke hurries home only to find his aunt and uncle's charred remains, having been brutally murdered by the same stormtroopers. Luke returns upset, but Obi-Wan tells him there was nothing he could do, and that he would have been killed too, and the plans would be in possession of the Empire. With nothing keeping him on Tatooine, Luke, Obi-Wan, and the two droids travel to Mos Eisley to find passage to Alderaan, Princess Leia's home planet. Aboard the Death Star, Cassio Taga argues with Conan Antonio Motti about the station's vulnerability to the rebels and points out that the rebellion has been gaining support within the Imperial Senate. Wulhuf Tarkin enters the room with Darth Vader and informs them that the Emperor has dissolved the Senate completely, sweeping away the last remnant of the Old Republic. Believing fear will keep the galaxy in line, Motti boasts the power of the Death Star, to which Vader replies that its power is insignificant compared to the Force. When Motti mocks Vader's belief in the Force, Vader force chokes him, until Tarkin orders him to stop, and expresses his own desire to crush the rebellion. Back in Mos Eisley, Luke, Obi-Wan and the droids run into a patrol of stormtroopers, who ask for their identification. Obi-Wan uses a Jedi mind trick on the lead trooper, who lets them pass. Arriving at Chalmund Spaceport Cantina, the group hires smuggler Han Solo and his first mate, a Wookiee named Chewbacca, for 17,000 credits, 2,000 in advance and 15,000 upon arrival, to take the four of them to Alderaan aboard their ship, the Millennium Falcon. After Han has a brief run-in with Greedo over his debts to Crime Lord Jabba the Hutt, which ends with Han fatally shooting Greedo, they make it to the Falcon's hangar. A brief scuffle with stormtroopers and henchmen sent by Jabba ensues, and the Falcon escapes Imperial Star Destroyers over Tatooine and sets a course to Alderaan, unaware that the Death Star has just arrived there as well. Leia, having resisted being tortured with a mind probe for the location of the Rebel Alliance's headquarters, is brought before Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin threatens to use the Death Star superlaser on Leia's homeworld of Alderaan if she does not tell them the Rebel base's location. She reluctantly tells them the base is on Dantooine. But Tarkin orders Alderaan to be destroyed anyway for its role in supporting the rebels. Aboard the Millennium Falcon, Obi-Wan feels a great disturbance in the Force while Luke undergoes lightsaber training with a training remote. Upon dropping out of hyperspace, they find what seems to be an asteroid field in Alderaan's place. The Millennium Falcon is then pulled aboard the Death Star by its powerful tractor beam. Tarkin and Vader discover that Leia lied about the Rebel base's location, when their forces only discover the ruins of a base on Dantooine. Tarkin orders her to be executed. Han and Luke, now disguised as the two stormtroopers, the group storms a control room to figure out how to escape. Obi-Wan separates from the group to disable the tractor beam, leaving the others alone. Luke convinces Han and Chewbacca to rescue her with the vague promise of a grand reward. Luke frees Leia from her cell, but the group are pinned down by a squad of stormtroopers. Leia takes charge, blasting a hole in a nearby grate and jumping through, while Chewbacca, Luke, and Han all dive after the princess. The shoot ends up leading to a garbage compactor. Luke desperately calls to C-3PO over his comlink asking for the compactor to be shut down. R2-D2 manages to shut down the compactor just in time. After escaping from the trash compactor, the group hurries back to the Millennium Falcon. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, remaining completely undetected, shuts down the tractor beam. Vader, however, had sensed his presence through the Force. And, while Obi-Wan makes his way to the Millennium Falcon, confronts his old master and engages him in a lightsaber duel. Luke and the others make it back to the Falcon, where Luke and several stormtroopers witness the battle. Sparing one last glance at Luke, Obi-Wan allows himself to be struck down by Vader, thus becoming one with the Force and allowing Luke and the others to escape. Horrified and angered at having witnessed Obi-Wan's demise at the hands of Vader, Luke and the others are forced to flee on the Millennium Falcon under a hail of blaster fire from the stormtroopers. Still mourning Obi-Wan's death, Luke helps Solo fend off a squadron of TIE fighters. Despite their supposed victory, Leia correctly believes the Empire let them go in order to track them to the Rebel base. The crew of the Falcon finally meets the Rebel Alliance on the moon of Yavin 4, and the information in R2-D2 is turned over to them. General Dodonna plans the attack on the Death Star, as the plans reveal a weakness in the Death Star's design in the form of a thermal exhaust port leading to the station's reactor. Believing a direct hit with proton torpedoes will cause a chain reaction that will destroy the station, Dodonna tells the pilots to man their ships in preparation for the battle. To Luke's dismay, Han leaves after receiving his reward to settle his debts. The Rebel strike force begins its attack on the Death Star, as the space station approaches Yavin 4. A group of X-Wing and Y-Wing starfighters, Luke among them, assault a trench on the Death Star's surface to hit the station's vulnerable spot before it can destroy the Alliance's base. During this, most of the Rebel craft, including Luke's friend Biggs Darklighter, are picked off by a group of Imperial fighters led by Darth Vader. Tarkin is told by an Imperial officer that the rebels do pose a danger, but Tarkin refuses to evacuate in their supposed moment of triumph. With the Death Star only minutes from being in range to destroy Yavin 4, Luke makes one last run down the trench toward the exhaust port, just as Vader opens fire on Luke from his personal TIE advanced fighter. Han returns in the Millennium Falcon and attacks the Imperials, resulting in Vader's ship getting knocked out of the trench. Luke, aided by the voice of Kenobi and guided by the Force, accurately fires 2 proton torpedoes into the exhaust port, and the battle station explodes, killing Tarkin and everyone on board while Vader escapes into space. The few remaining ships, those of Wedge Antilles, Luke, Han, and a Y-Wing pilot, return to Yavin 4 and a victory ceremony commences, where medals are presented to the heroes. Han Solo and Luke Skywalker by Princess Leia, as the rebels give them a standing ovation.